And we're back once again, only on it's Last Call. Last Call, the alcohol, only on lastcallpodcast.com. And we're going to jump right into this here. I got, once again, Will Thomas of SEC Tailgate Talk. We got college football. We're going to jump right into this, just like the coaching changes. Will, let's start off here. Lane Kiffin is now the LSU head coach. It was speculated. We were waiting on it. It was almost like the presidential election after a while. We're like, we'll just let it be over, please. At the end of the day, is this the right move for LSU? And is it worth everything that he comes with? For all the good that Lane comes with, we have to admit there are some baggage and drama that, it's like, okay, it's like the hot crazy chick. It's maybe it's worth it. Maybe you have to after a couple of while, you're like, we made a big mistake.
I do think it's worth it. I mean, looking at like this is such a flex for LSU to land Kiffin because he was by far the biggest name in the cycle. And you're looking at LSU for the past 2 months or so. You fired Brian Kelly. He's suing your school. You don't have an AD. You don't have a president. They're able to put that all together and then still be the final option for the biggest name on the market. Like that is just such a flex for their program and really showing that LSU still is one of, if not the best jobs in the conference. And when it comes to Lane, I mean, just like you said, like you're going to have to deal with some stuff that you don't need to deal with most other coaches. If you're winning, it doesn't matter. Like I always look back at just Florida, for example. There were some problems under Urban Meyer with Florida, but they won a pair of championships, so no one cared. Winning really gets rid of every sort of problem that you could have with a guy. I mean, obviously to a certain extent, but I mean, I think Land can. I mean, he has the opportunity to win massive at LSU. Expectation wise, like obviously the baseline is pretty much going to be getting the playoff every year, not just because you're at LSU, but because this is now Lane at LSU. He has everything he can need to be successful. He did it at Ole Miss. He's got to do it at LSU. And honestly, they're probably sitting there like looking at Lane and saying, "You've got to go win us one by 2028." Like that's kind of what we're expecting. Like 3 or 4 years, we should have another trophy in our trophy case. So, I mean, this is a home run hire. Obviously, Lane was one of the biggest. Oh, sorry, it was the biggest name on the market. So this is a big time hire for LSU.
How much did he damage his brand though with people? Because I get it. It's as somebody said, it's the calendar. You have to get a coach sooner rather than later, or else you're risking Armageddon. He had everything he said he wanted. He wanted to be loved. He was loved. He wanted to compete. He was competing. His team was in the national championship. They will be in the playoff. We all know that.
Hmm.
Was it worth it for him to literally just come across like the petulant child who demanded to have his cake, eat it, and not get fat, burn bridges, and now, as you said, he better win a national championship within 2 years, or else LSU might start going, "Eh, I don't know if we want to deal with the hot, crazy person anymore."
I think it's very easy and convenient to vilify Lane Kiffin for everybody because of his personality, what he's been in the past, and to a certain degree how he handled the situation. My question to everybody really is like, obviously it wasn't a great spot. What specifically should he have done differently? Because the easy answer to that is, well, just sign with Ole Miss and this all goes away. But that's not what he wanted to do. He's not going to do something that he doesn't think is best for his future just because people on Twitter will be less bothered by it. I look, it was not a situation at all. I can't look at anything that Lane did really and be like, he handled that like a douchebag or he handled that horribly wrong. Like the situation sucked. And for Lane, he did a good job. Like he never addressed any of it in press conferences. Like the media was trying to get, was trying to get clips, was trying to get their paycheck. That's why this all blew up. He wasn't out there in press conferences saying, yeah, I'm talking to Florida. Yeah, I'm talking to LSU. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. He shut down questions all the time. So to me, it's convenient and it's easy to make Lane Kiffin the bad guy for the general public. And does he say things that rub people the wrong way? Absolutely. Does he still troll on the internet? 100%. That's just who he is. And if you don't like it, unfollow him. And it feels to me like the situation would it have been quieter with other coaches? Sure. But would it have really been different underneath the surface? I don't think so. I don't think that's what really falls on Kiffin.
I guess my problem was he knew, like, okay, if you are going to LSU, you can't like demand to coach, throughout the playoffs. That's just not
Mhm.
feasible. I mean, you and I both understand. It's like asking a guy, "Oh, by the way, yeah, I know that it's like basically if your fiance said, "Yeah, I'm divorcing. I'm dropping you at the altar, but I still want to go to Cancun, a honeymoon party." Like
Yeah, yeah,
there are he knew what he was doing. So I guess that's what pisses people off. Like it's for all that he said how he's changed, he's still the same Lane Kiffin, where it's I will do what's best for me.
Mhm.
And damn the torpedoes. I will ask for the moon. If not, then I'm gonna just threaten to, raid, pillage, and plunder unless I get my way. So, yeah, to me, he's the villain. It's like, okay, you knew, and we'll get to Jon Sumrall. Like, they understand. I gotta leave. Once I take this new job, I gotta leave. I can't just ask to stay around and then hinder Ole Miss.
Yeah. I agree with you that it's definitely the right decision for Ole Miss to not let him coach the playoff. But just to play devil's advocate, I mean, Summerall's doing it. Florida is not making Summerall leave. Summerall did the press conference yesterday and flew right back to Tulane because he's got a game on Friday and he's got maybe a playoff spot. So if you're Lane, you're looking at that like, I mean, he wouldn't obviously acknowledge the difference in Tulane versus Florida versus Ole Miss versus LSU, but he'd be like, this guy's doing it. Why can't I do it? So that's just the other side of that. But just like, to be clear, I do 100% agree with you. He could not coach the playoffs with Ole Miss while being LSU's coach.
Final question on Lane Kiffin. So, should he expect players from Ole Miss? Because you read from what reports, and the players are
Mhm.
pissed
Yeah.
because it was always like they want a straight answer, and he could never give it to them. He never addressed it. Should he expect players to just jump into the portal and transfer to LSU, or should he look at some of those guys like Keywan Lacey, Chambliss, other guys from Ole Miss, and realize, yeah, you burned us. Especially when coaches say, we're all in this together. Well, we're all in this together until I get a better paycheck and then I'm out the door.
Yeah, it's tricky because when this buzz was first going on about Kiffin leaving, and I thought he'd be going to Florida, like I'm sort of looking at Florida's chart, like depth chart, I'm thinking like, boy, Kawan Lacey and Jaden Ball in the same backfield next year, like it's gonna be crazy. But once the situation played out, it doesn't matter to me that he's at LSU versus Florida, but just with how it all played out, like you said, with the players' meeting where he wasn't even at the meeting, where he was in his office and they had to go find him instead of him coming to there, it does feel like that relationship might be split. So I don't like. I think with I'll just go back to Summerall in Florida. I think that you'll see the players at Tulane who Summerall wants to bring up follow him. I don't think you'll see that going from Ole Miss to LSU just because it's a big time upgrade, but for the players, it's less of an upgrade than it is for Kiffin, in my opinion, if that makes any sense. Versus like being at Tulane going to Florida, that's a massive upgrade for everybody involved. So the incentive is almost less for the players to go from Ole Miss to LSU regardless, but especially with how it feels like the players reacted to this situation and how there's kind of that turning on Lane, there's that rallying around Pete Golding. Like, I would be shocked if we see a similar number of players follow Lane like you do with some other coaches when they do move jobs.
So good luck to Pete Golding. He's now the new head coach at Ole Miss. What should we expect? Is he the next Sharon Moore, where we think that where he's taking over and everything looks pretty decent in Michigan, or if you're Ole Miss, are you looking at this going, yeah, you're our coach for now, but we're not sure because it seems like he's the stopgap until they figure maybe things out down the road.
Yeah, that was my first thought too. But I mean, when they announced that Golding, like they didn't say he's the interim head coach. They didn't say he's finishing the year. They announced him as their head coach. Like there is tons of confidence in the Ole Miss building that he can just be their guy. And Golding was someone who I thought, maybe not necessarily this year, but 2 or 3 years down the line, we'd see him take a head coaching job. And that got sped up because of this Kiffin thing. So I do think Golding is actually, it seems like the best that Ole Miss could do right now. Because with how long it took with Kiffin, they missed out on Jon Sumrall. They missed out on Alex Golesh. Their hires were gone by the time that they knew for sure that Kiffin was out of there. So now you get a guy in your building who loves Ole Miss and who the players really love. I mean, the video from their meeting, like, there was a great reaction from the team when Keith Carter announced that Golding was the coach. And Golding, he says the right things. He's a really intense guy, but he's another one of those coordinators who was under Saban, and now he was under Kiffin. We have seen Saban coordinators turn into dominant head coaches. And it seems like Golding sort of has that DNA to potentially be one of those really good head coaches who just makes that jump up from a coordinator when the opportunity is given to him and he dominates. And he is going to be able to, I think, given what I know about his personality and what I've already seen him say, he is going to turn this Lane Kiffin thing into such a rallying cry. He's going to use it as a total middle finger from their players, from their head coach to them saying, I can't do it with you. Even though I have you at 11-1 and we're going to the playoff, I can't do it with you. I'm going to do it somewhere else that's better. They're going to use that Golding is as a rallying cry to get this team going. And I think that you'll really see a very together Ole Miss team. You'll see a fired up Ole Miss team. So I do think getting Golding, who's been very adamant, clearly and publicly now, about the Kiffin thing. Like it came out that he was telling Kiffin to get the hell out of his office on Saturday night because he knew he was gone. Like he wasn't putting up with it because he cares about the school and he cares about the team. I think Golding was such a good hire, especially in this spot for Ole Miss, to help them get on a playoff run even without Lane.
I guess the big question then going forward with Golding is who the hell is he going to select for his offensive coordinator and offensive staff? Because they're all gone. They got on that plane with Lane and they jettisoned to LSU. So like Charlie Weiss Jr. gone, the wide receivers coach gone, um, Chris Kiffin gone, Joe Cox gone. So who does he grab and who's still around there that he can trust to be the offensive coordinator going forward for Ole Miss?
Yeah, frankly, my answer is I'm not sure. Like I don't really know exactly who is still in that building. I don't know the exact personnel there. So you've got to find, there's got to be a position coach left over. There's got to be some sort of analyst left over who he knows he can trust to at least sort of copy and paste the plan that we've seen them use with Lane and just be able to get those guys going. But if nothing else, can you just trust Ole Miss's defense, which has been fine. It hasn't been as good as it has been in the past. But if you're Golding, can you look at your defense and say, like, look, guys, Lane is gone. Weiss is gone. It is on us. Nobody can get to 20, and it's on us. So I wonder if like he'll have to just promote somebody to be the play caller, but in that building there has to be an understanding that the offense is probably not going to be the same. So then can the defense step up, know how important they are to this playoff push, and not let anybody break 24 to keep Ole Miss in these playoff games for however long they go?
We'll get to this in the next few weeks, but let's get to what I think is the best hire right now, the whole college football coaching cycle. Jon Sumrall to Florida. He is the antithesis of everything we've seen lately with Florida, where if they get the hotshot offense coordinator, or if they get the fun play caller, he is, if Lane Kiffin is on one spectrum, this guy is on the other, it seems. As he said, I don't care if you're my friend. If I don't think you're a good hire, I'm not going to hire you. He is a guy who is worked through the trenches in terms of working at Troy, working at Tulane, dealing with people leaving, dealing with kids transferring out, and all he does is win. Is this probably the best fit for Florida in terms of what they need and getting a guy who can get them back to where they want to be?
He definitely shut a lot of people up at the press conference yesterday with what he said because, I mean, yes, Summerall, to your first point, he is objectively a good, borderline great hire. We'll see how it goes. But just the optics of the Kiffin letdown are what's making this look like an issue. Because really going back to even last year, Florida fans were effectively promised Lane Kiffin when they moved on from Napier. Like it was a shoe-in. And then throughout the whole process, like there were the reports that Florida was fading out. Florida never faded out. And we'll get to it with some of the other coaches, but like you saw at the end, Golesh went from Arkansas to Auburn, Summerall from Auburn to Florida. All these coaches moved up rungs at the last second because the confidence that Kiffin was going to Florida wasn't just in their building. It was a shared confidence. And it fell through because of, specific reasons underneath the hood. But now, with those optics aside, Summerall is a really good hire. And the Kentucky fans, like, they are heartbroken that they didn't get Summerall and that he went to the Gators. That should really kind of tell you, like, this guy's legit. He is a total psychopath. He has shown the ability to consistently compete in and dominate the American Conference, which honestly at this point should just be a power conference because you get a playoff team from that spot every single year. Like he is ultimate competitor. He has a few screws loose in the best way possible. And there are a lot of similarities to Billy Napier that Summerall has, but that sort of ability to fly off the hook and just be crazy is a good thing. Because there were times, really throughout all 4 years that Napier was at Florida, that he was like too calm, that it felt like he didn't care, that he was totally complacent with whatever was going on. That's not going to be the case with Summerall. Like he has shown that he is willing to make changes on the fly. Napier wasn't. He has shown that he's willing to lose his mind in an official's ear that to work that crew during a game. Napier wasn't. So yeah, you can say group of five guy from Louisiana. We're just hired another Napier. We want to Kiffin. Blah 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 blah. Summerall is everything that Napier didn't have and a lot more. He is a really good hire when you zoom out and take like a 30,000 foot angle.
This is what to one of my guys who follows the SEC and they love this. They said they love Sumrall more than Kiffin just because Sumrall has that mentality like like for Georgia. I forget the Georgia head coach's name, but the same mentality of I'm going to outwork you on the recruiting field.
Yeah.
I'm going to outwork you in coaching. I'm going to outwork you. Is that what Florida needed? Somebody who literally will go, I don't care who the hell's on the recruiting trail. I'm going to get this kid. I'm going to be, you know, relentless. Like I'm going to be Kirby Smart 2.0, and if you don't like me, well, go to hell because I'm still going to get this kid.
Yeah, they need a dog. Because Napier didn't really have that in him where he was like, I'm going to kill you if you're in my way. And you need that to win in the SEC. You need that to win at Florida. Spurrier and Urban Meyer won at Florida not because they were nice. They hated everybody else. That's what you need. That's what you need. So with Florida getting that in Summerall, it is going to be that attitude shift. Like there was complacency in the coaching staff. Like the the softness of Florida's coaching staff was obvious. They would go after losses, search their names on Twitter, and start retweeting and liking things that fans were saying, like to mock them. That is not going to happen with Summerall and his guys because they actually care about the football field. They don't care about all the chatter outside. They want to win football games because that's all they know. So that culture shift is going to totally transform the way that Florida is run operationally, and it's definitely what the Gators need.
One of the points of contention between Florida and Lane Kiffin was Lane wanted his own guy for the GM. Florida preferred
Yeah.
NFL guy. Dave Caldwell's for GM. How does this fit into that with Summerall? Like, is it easier for him now having a guy who can scout talent, understand what he's looking for, and because he's from the NFL, he has more sources. I mean, is for Summerall, how big is that having a guy who's going to just worry about the recruiting, worry about, the scouting?
Yeah, I think it's really big because Summerall is going to have his hands on everything. He's not like he's going to be just like sitting back passively, just being the guy, the main guy on the sidelines. Like he'll have his hands on everything, but he doesn't need to do everything. And that is kind of that's ideal for him because this elevation from a job from Tulane to Florida, I'm not saying that he's not ready, but if he threw himself into having to do everything, it might be overwhelming, even for a guy like him. So having a GM who can do all kind of the dirty work for him and then give it to Summerall where then he can make these calls, he can make the decisions and all that, it's going to make it a lot easier. It's going to make it, slightly less stressful, even though it's hard to have a stress-free day as the head coach of Florida, but having a GM, like you said, from the NFL with all this experience, with all these connections, it definitely takes a degree of the load off of Summerall and will free him up to really take care of every aspect of this program.
Biggest winner probably in all this is Scott Strickland because when Lane left, I mean, we were reading like, oh, fire Strickland, get rid of Strickland, hang him upside and beat him with a rubber hose, and now all of a sudden it's the Gator fans in Gainesville. They've been talked off the edge. They love Sumrall. How big is this for Strickland that he looks strong by not giving Lane everything and the son? He finds a guy that the fans and the players seem to love, and he didn't have to sacrifice anything. He didn't have to just, give up his vision and go, yep, I'll kowtow to the football coach. Football guy is everything, and I'm just the side piece.
Yeah, it's good for him because now that there is some of that goodwill of Summerall, there's a little heat off of Strickland. Florida fans still hate him. I mean, they're still so sick of this guy because he struck out on his football hires for the most part. And with the other sports, there have been some really ugly things with the hires that he's made off the field, with things that are they're just not good society things. So he covered some bad things up. There's still not a lot of goodwill with Florida fans around him. If Summerall totally pans out, that will ease off a little bit. Like I said, with winning fixes everything earlier in the show, but there's still not a ton of goodwill with Strickland among Florida fans. And if Summerall doesn't work out and Strickland has the ability to make another hire, there's going to be a problem in Gainesville. I can't imagine that happens. I'd imagine if Summerall strikes out again, Strickland will be out. But there's definitely less. There's a little less, Strickland now that Summerall did the press conference. He won the fan base over, but there's still not a lot of goodwill with Scott among Florida fans.
So we go from one guy who was a slant dunk hire, another one who was a home run, to Alex Golesh as Auburn head coach. I like it and I don't. Talk me into this because they replaced one offensive coordinator who didn't pan out with another head coach who's also an offensive coordinator.
Mhm.
So why is Alex Golesh going to be a better fit than the last two offensive, guru coaches who came in and we all thought, oh yeah, Brian Harson's going to be the answer. Oh, no, he's not. And then the last idiot they brought in, oh, he's going to be the answer. No, he's not. So why is Alex Golesh, in your opinion, a good hire for Auburn?
Yeah, I do love it. I really do love it. He's an offensive guy, like you said, with SEC experience. I am kind of describing Hugh Freeze there, but I do think Golesh is better for a few reasons. I mean, retention is incredibly important. Roster retention when you get a new coach. And when you're looking at Golesh, he had so much success with Byron Brown as a dual threat quarterback, dominating the American Conference, sort of an unstoppable guy. Auburn is sitting on Deuce Knight, that true freshman, who he only got action against Mercer, and I understand that it's Mercer, but he ran for like a buck 70 and 4 touchdowns. Like he is an absolutely he's a nightmare for defenses with his legs, and you're already seeing that. So Deuce should stick around with Golish. With a guy like Cam Coleman, like the proof of concept is there with Golish offenses for these good players to stick around. Now it's going to be hard to keep Coleman anyways because every elite school is going to throw so much money at him because of how good of a player he is. But I do think Golish, like more than Summerall, if Auburn had gotten Summerall, I think Cam Coleman's out of there. I think Deuce Knight might be out of there. But with Golish and being able to retain those players, it's incredibly important. And also, if he does keep DJ Durkin on staff as defensive coordinator, that will help him hold on to those defensive guys like Keldrick Falk, Malik Blockton, all those elite guys who are five-star players. Like this Auburn roster is incredible. The team just kind of fell apart this year. The bottom fell out with the coaching staff, with all that. But if Golish can hold on to those players, he can go out and win 8 games next year and turn this around fast. And in terms of what Auburn's been missing, they've been missing consistent quarterback play, which, like I do think that Golish solves if he keeps Deuce Knight, and the turnover margin. Golish isn't, the defensive guy, but his defenses at USF, they have been unbelievable at forcing turnovers. So you're bringing in a guy in Golish who, on paper, in theory, fixes Auburn's quarterback issues and turnover margin issues. If they had those two things fixed over the last 2 years, this team has probably won 17 or 18 games since the beginning of last season. Like they've just been missing those small factors that Golish has proven to be really, really good at when he's the head coach of teams. So I think he comes in plugging the hole that Auburn has, and with his pedigree, I think he can retain a lot of the talent on that roster.
So how will he be different, I guess, than Hugh Freeze and, of course,
Mhm.
Brian Harsin, who shout out to Philip Jordan of SCC Auburn because he's basically just said, yes, Brian Harsin deserved to be dragged by the heels, outside by a truck, 5 miles, just get him out of here. He was bad. Auburn fans felt the same about him, and then Hugh Freeze. So again, it just seems like, okay, hey, we had an offensive coordinator coach turned head coach. He failed from Idaho. We got another guy, a Southerner guy, who was an offensive minded, guru head coach, and he failed again. I mean, how do we know that this isn't going to be rinse and repeat and goal? Like, what makes Golish different in terms of his mentality, and how? And should we worry that he's not a Southerner? This is a Russian-born Ohio Midwest guy coming to the South who, yeah, I know it's changed, but still, like we hear, you have to be Southern, a Southerner to really understand the SEC.
I do believe that to a degree. But I mean, Nick Saban, he's not from the South. And I don't want to compare Golesh to Saban. And I do agree with your point generally about fit, but we have seen non-Southern coaches pan out. And your point about him being, from the Middle East, not Middle East, excuse me, from Europe. Josh Pate actually brought this up. Like the adversity that he's been through in his life it has nothing to do with football, but it has prepared him for the adversity and the pressure that he feels as a college football coach. Like I think to a degree, you kind of saw Hugh Freeze crumble under the pressure at Auburn from the lack of success, from people making fun of him for golfing all the time. Golish, I don't think has the ability to break. Like this dude is literally a warrior from what he's gone through in his life, which I do think, like not I'm not trying to poke like genuinely I do believe that is a big factor for this. But to your when you ask about how do we know there's going to be different, I guess we don't. We don't know anything for sure, but I do believe that having, a younger guy come in who doesn't really have the threat of burnout like Hugh Freeze seemed like he did, who when he was the coordinator for Tennessee, their offense was incredible. He left in Tennessee. They've been good offensively. They were great this year. It hadn't been the same. They haven't been that feared offensive unit that they were when Golish was there. So I really think just having a fresh, young perspective in Golish as their head coach is good. A guy who is so emotionally and like spiritually battle tested as a man in Golish is genuinely a big help. I do think he just kind of brings a new perspective, sort of a new fire, and just a new personality to that program that really needed it.
Ryan Silverfield was announced as the Arkansas head coach, and if I was sort of like a little bit side-eyed about Alex Golesh and you talked me off the edge, I'm the opposite. I mean, I know Arkansas fans are like this guy here, but to me, like, isn't this the guy that you want for Arkansas? Like, he took over Memphis, he made it his own, he won consistently. It's Memphis, which they're used to having to have guys leave for transfer
Mhm.
portal, not the the money. I mean, I get he never won the division, but still, this to me sounds like a great hire for an Arkansas team. Which, and look, I get it. Everybody loved the previous guys, but. Half the time we looked at Arkansas, went, okay, do they really want to play? Like Silverfield, you can at least say he will make his guys play.
Yeah, I don't think it is a nightmare of a hire like some of their fans are thinking. It's definitely a little disappointing. It feels like they had to settle because when the job first opened up, you heard John Gruden's name. And then last week, they had all but announced Alex Golesh as their coach. But like I said, like with Kiffin going to LSU instead of Florida, that moved Summerall up to Florida, that moved Golesh up to Auburn, and it brought Silverfield to Arkansas. So they kind of had to settle for a guy that they thought they were kind of a notch above. But the important thing for Arkansas fans to know is like you have to be realistic about your program. They won 2 games this year. Ryan Silverfield could go 4-8 next year and double their win total from this season. Like no one was going to come in and turn around Arkansas in one year. We're in an era where that's possible with certain teams. It's not really possible with Arkansas. And like you said with Silverfield, like he's built Memphis into a yearly competitor. He beat Arkansas with Memphis this year. Like he knows how to win. I just think that the negative feelings are really coming from they thought it was John Gruden at first, and then Alex Golesh had reportedly agreed to terms, but then the dominoes fell. Golesh moved on, and it just felt like they kind of had to settle for Silverfield.
How weird is that, though? It's like, oh yeah, they're forced to settle for Ryan Silverfield, and yet you could argue he is on the same level as Alex Golesh. I mean, he
Hmm.
wins in a place where it's tough to win. He deals with you know a lot of obstacles that Arkansas fans don't understand about in terms of players leaving for bigger, better opportunities. Why, like again, for if you're an Arkansas fan and you're down on this, why is it that what is it about Ryan Silverfield that makes him lesser than Golish, I guess?
He's a little less flashy, and to me, that's not a negative, right? Because it doesn't really matter to me how you win games as long as you win them. But the general perspective is, if your teams aren't fun to watch and you can't bet the over every week and make your money back, like it's kind of a negative, which I disagree with as a point, but he's definitely a little less flashy than Golish is. But to counter that, like roster retention, I talked about it with Golish at Auburn a little bit. He needs to keep KJ Jackson at quarterback. That guy is a stud. He needs to keep Mike Washington Jr. at running back. Like Arkansas has those pieces offensively, or they had one of the best offenses in the country this year. They only won 2 games, so you don't hear about it. But that unit was awesome. And Silverfield has shown that he can score points. It's not like goal scoring points, but his offenses aren't, he doesn't have to win games 17 to 14. He can win them in the 30s. That's how he beat Arkansas this year in the 30s. So he's a little less consistently flashy than Goalish, and he's perceived as the backup option. And you're also looking at, the last guy from Memphis to come out was Mike Norvell. And you can say what you want about 2023. He's been a disaster at FSU. So you almost wonder, like, is this going to be a rinse and repeat of Mike Norvell moving on from Memphis to, now all of a sudden we're not going to go anywhere? But that's kind of why I brought up the expectations at Arkansas. Like, Arkansas should not, their fans shouldn't expect to be winning 9 games a year. They shouldn't be expecting to be a playoff contender, at least not at this point. So, what's wrong with giving Silverfield 3 years to make a bowl game? What's wrong with giving him some time to start winning just 2 or 3 SEC games a year to really show that tangible progress? Because, if 3 years from now, let's say Arkansas is still like barely ranked, not making a playoff push, but they went 4-4 in the SEC. Like that, you're still showing a proof of concept and you're showing tangible progress to where at Arkansas, that's a success. So it's really just relative to what that program has been, where you can look at this and say, like, really, what is the problem? We won 2 games this year. Do we think Silverfield's going to go 1-11 next year? Because I sure don't. Like, he can go 4-8 and double the win total. So it is all just kind of relative to expectations, how you have to manage this. And the disappointment from not getting Golish is fine, but Silverfield, I think he's totally fine for where Arkansas is right now as a program.
Well, if Silverfield was sort of and Alex Goresh like optimistic here, I think it's safe to say Oklahoma State fans are already like, we're in heaven. We're in heaven. Eric Morris and Drew Mestemaker coming here. We're not sure about Drew, but Eric Morris, the ultimate, I guess, quarterback guru, is taking his talents all the way from North Texas to Oklahoma State. Can he do it? I mean, we know he can do win it with North Texas. We know he's coached, Patrick Mahomes, Drew Mestemaker, and a bunch of other talented guys. Is he now good enough to win in the Big 12, which is a big step up compared to the American Alliance Conference?
It is, but I mean, the Big 12, it is so wide open every year. I mean, it's been kind of talked to death, but I mean, Arizona State picked last year, won the conference, made the playoff. Like the Big 12 is a solid conference with good teams, and you can probably expect that like Texas Tech will be a perennial power now in that conference. But like, other good team is like what? It's BYU, who might be losing their coach. It's Utah, who's been kind of trying to figure out where they're at now that Cam Rising is gone. Like the conference is wide open and you're bringing in Eric Morris, who effectively promises you like 35 points a game. And if you can bring Mestamaker with him, that's huge. If you can bring over some of the other skill guys and just sort of pitch his offense to some of the other Big 12 recruits, because like the Big 12 recruiting grounds, you can get, even if it's just like a 3-star receiver, that's probably a guy who's a lightning bolt and is a massive playmaker. So I think that for Eric Morris, in Stillwater, he can recruit really good offensive guys. If you can bring Messamaker with him, you have your quarterback for the next 2 years. All it takes in the Big 12 is scoring 35 points a week to win more than half your conference games, which sounds like a lot, but in the Big 12, it's really not. So being in this conference that's so perennially wide open, I do think it's a really good hire because he's coming in with the correct philosophy for the conference. A defensive coach in the Big 12, like it could work, but that's not what you're used to seeing. You're used to seeing high flying offenses go win that conference, and that's what Morris brings.
How much does it help that he knows he sort of knows the area and he's young. He's a 40-year-old, from Littlefield, Texas. He was the co-offense coordinator, wide receivers coach for years in Texas Tech. So that he had to recruit that place like crazy. That he is friends. He is on good terms with Patrick Mahomes. He's worked with Cam Ward. Like, how much does that help recruiting? Where he knows all the players in Texas and Oklahoma. Probably he knows how to get quarterbacks, and he can probably use those connections to now. get that, four-star, five-star quarterback from Texas, from Oklahoma, because hey, I can turn you into the next Patrick Mahomes. I can turn you into the next Cam Ward. I can turn you into the next Drew Mestamaker.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, showing that proof of concept to where you can develop these guys into not just, stars at the college level, but stars in the pros. That's a massive pitch. Because sure, these guys are making money now in college. It's not the same money they're making as a first round pick in the NFL. So having that pitch is incredibly important. And like I said, with the recruiting grounds, there are tons of incredible skill players throughout Oklahoma, throughout Texas, throughout that whole region that he can pitch like, oh, this big school is just kind of iffy on you. I'm all in on you. Come play with Messamaker. Come play for me. We're gonna put up 40 a week. You're gonna love it. So we can definitely pitch that, and I think he's in a really good spot there in Stillwater, and obviously filling in for Mike Gundy, even though it fell off at the end. Those are big shoes to fill at Oklahoma State. But all you got to do is start lighting up that scoreboard, and you're going to have a lot of good favor from fans. It'll be a great recruiting pitch to all these skill players that you want to get. I think he's in a really good spot.
Last three coaches you talked about, it was like, oh, they got to keep this kid. They got to keep this kid. With Morris, it seems more like, oh, he needs to bring more of his North Texas
Mhm.
players with him. So, is there anybody right now in Oklahoma State that jumps out that he needs to keep, or is he going in this with like, okay, this roster I can turn over if I need to bring in 40, 50 new players, I can do that. There isn't this, I need to win this kid over.
Yeah, I don't really think that there is. I think that with Morris, coming in like, I mean, Oklahoma State won one football game this year. There's not a lot of guys that you're looking at there who you like, we need to keep this guy in order to have success. I mean, maybe Rodney Fields Jr., the running back, he had 5 yards per carry. Like you could bring him in as a solid running threat to complement the passing game you think he brings. But really, I do think this has to be a bit of a patience game. I said that the Big 12 is wide open and you can win that conference any year, which I do believe still is true. But at Oklahoma State, same thing with Arkansas. This is extreme, but like he could win 2 games next year, double your win total. But really, just like making a bowl game next year is a success. You're adding 5 wins to your win total from last year. You'd be showing a proof of concept of this offense works, this scheme works. So it's much less keeping the players at Oklahoma State right now, and more so just can you bring in your guys and can you show improvement that you and your guys are better than what we had last year? Because that's kind of all you need to immediately gain goodwill with the fans, goodwill with the administration, and buy yourself some more of that time and some more credibility at that school to continue to recruit better and better players, more and more of them, and really get this thing going.
I'd say this is the most controversial hire.
Hmm.
And look, Michigan State needs, unfortunately, they need to move on. Coach Smith was not working. We understood that. Instead, though, they get Pat Fitzgerald. Let's talk about first Pat Fitzgerald, the coach. He built Northwestern up to a program that was respectable, especially when you consider Northwestern has much tougher academic standards than
Hmm.
Michigan State. For a pure X's O's, is this a good hire right now for Michigan State, going from an offensive-minded guy from Oregon to a Midwestern, defensive-minded, rough and tough rumble coach?
I do think it is because, like you said with Northwestern, like he knows how to win in the Big Ten. He knows what it takes, and he'll be able to recruit better athletes, overall at Michigan State than he was at Northwestern because of the academic standards. And I mean, Michigan State they're a respectable enough program to where kids who grew up there locally, like they'll remember a decent bit like when Michigan State was relevant, because I do, and these kids are just a bit younger than me, so they'll have that understanding of what Michigan State can be, and they'll understand what Fitzgerald can do with good talent, and with Big Ten talent at that. So I do think X's and O's wise, it's a good hire, and if nothing else, Jonathan Smith, he wasn't working. So regardless, you just need that change. So bringing in a guy who is experienced in the conference has shown that he can win in the conference. I do think it's a win.
So we'll get back to the X's and O's. Let's talk about Vo. And man, we really had to talk about this because right now it looks bad for Michigan State. So 2023, they had Mel Tucker, and then he got into some trouble with, let's just say, some hanky panky, and he got, with women, and sexual harassment. Then they fired him. They hired Jonathan Smith 2 years later. Okay, hey, we're changing the culture. We're changing it. Eh, Will, we are changing the culture. And now they fired Jonathan Smith and brought in a guy who, oh, by the way, he got fired for hazing, which was a bit with maybe some sexual, assault involved in this. It just looks like, Michigan State is run by a clown show. And oh, yeah, so we learned our lesson from Mel Tucker, but we really didn't learn a lesson. So we're getting a guy who got fired for hazing, and we're hiring him as the head coach. What the hell is going on Michigan State? It's almost like they're trying to show, hey, if you thought Penn State was screwed up, we're even more screwed up.
Yeah, it's the program as a whole is not in a good spot the past 3 years. I mean, you nailed it with going from Mel Tucker issues. You hire a guy who's, a little more buttoned up, and then you go right back to a guy who's had his fair share of issues. But I brought up with Lane, and it's kind of a harsh reality because I don't think you should ever be excusing, bad things off the field. If he comes out and wins 8 games next year, people are going to forget about it. They're going to forget that he has this sort of iffy past. They're going to forget that, you're going from scandalous coach, bad coach to another scandalous coach. Like winning does kind of fix that. I don't know if it necessarily should, but it does. So it's definitely a sketchy hire on the surface for that reason. And with that in mind, he probably doesn't have a lot of time, which is not a great situation because I think he's going to need the time. You look at, I mean, Michigan State, their best two offensive players were Mekhi Frazier at running back and Nick Marsh at receiver. They're both in the portal. So now they could come back, but I doubt that they will because those are both really good players who know that they can be better used elsewhere. So I think it's going to be hard for Fitzgerald to win early, but if he wants to gain that goodwill, he's gonna have to find a way to do that. So it's going to be tricky.
How much of this, when you look at this whole hire, is this is the best they could do? That, I'm guessing after firing Jonathan Smith after 2 years, and I get it, that Michigan State was not happy, but from the outside looking in, if you're a coach like an Eric Morris, a Ryan Silverfield, even Jon Sumrall Matt Campbell from Iowa State, you probably
Mhm.
looked at that one. Oh, wait a minute here. You fired a coach. You only gave him 2 years. Now you're gonna hire another coach. Hard pass. Lose our number. We're not interested. Like, is Pat Fitzgerald basically there because nobody else wanted the job?
I do think that's probably true with current head coaches. I don't know if they did or not, but I mean, it definitely would have been worth kicking the tires on Will Stein and Brian Hartline. Because Will Stein is now going to Kentucky. Hartline is still at Ohio State. His name was thrown around in these coaching decisions. He hasn't been hired, so I doubt that at this one that he will be. So I do wonder. I mean, they could have totally called Hartline. He said no, and that was it. That's why they didn't do it. If they didn't check in on either of those guys, Stein or Hartline, that's just malpractice because you could bring in a guy who is an incredibly fun coordinator, up and coming guy who a lot of people do believe they deserve head coaching jobs, who are a clean slate and don't have this baggage that Fitzgerald has. So, assuming they did kick the tires on those coordinators, then Fitzgerald is definitely the best they could do, at least from a current head coach perspective. There were definitely better names out there that they could have interviewed. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know that. But I do think you're right about this Michigan State job is probably not super appealing right now. So Fitzgerald kind of wanting his way back in is probably a big reason why he's there.
I like Bob Chesney. Bob Chesney has won every place he's gone, from James Madison, Holy Cross. Now he takes on the challenge of UCLA, and if you're just going by one of the good coaching candidates, I could make an argument Bob Chesney's as good as Jon Sumrall, as good as Alex Golesh, as good as Ryan Silverfield in terms of winning football games and coaching hard and everything. It feels like a weird fit. A New England guy who's never been to the West Coast, and now you're plucking him in UCLA, which you talked about. It's not that really great of a job because there's money funds. There's you're not sure about the the NIL transfer portal. Are they committing to it? Can he succeed at UCLA? Is he a good enough to coach to do this, or is this one of those things we're going to look at and go, Man, Bob, you made a mistake.
There's definitely a path for him to have relative success there. Right. I'm not sure that I'm ready to say he can have them competing in the Big Ten in the next 3 years. I don't think I'm ready to say that this is a situation where we could see him in playoff talk in 2029. But, last coach from JMU up at Indiana, I'd say he's doing pretty good. So if Chesney can even just mirror just some of that success early on, can he get UCLA to a bowl next year? Can they knock off a decently high profile Big Ten team? Just one or two of those wins to show that you can compete in the conference, that'd be a pretty good start. In terms of the retention, does for the first question is, does he want Nico back at quarterback? And the second question is, can he keep him if he does want him? A guy like Quasi Gilmore, can he keep him at receiver? Some of those defensive pieces, can he hold on to him? Because UCLA, like you're competing with USC in your city for a similar talent pool, but there's so much on the West Coast that UCLA does have the ability under the right coach with the right recruiters to have very good players on their roster year in and year out. And I think that with Chesney having the pedigree that he does have of being a consistent winner, even though he's not from the region, a guy who maybe got left off of USC's board will see that and be like, okay, this guy can win games. He can coach me up. I'll go play for UCLA. So I don't, I'm not ready to say he's, where some of these other coaches that we've talked about are, where I think you could see like real national level success in 3 or 4 years. But I do believe he can get UCLA out of the gutter. I do believe he can get, some more eyes in the Big Ten on them to where they can start knocking off some of these better schools. Like maybe they go get a win over Iowa in a few years. Maybe they can consistently just sort of separate themselves from the Northwesterns, the Michigan States, the Marylands of the conference, and sort of be a tier above that. I think he can do that in the next few years.
For UCLA, this is their first. This is what I learned here. It's their first coach-to-coach hires almost since 1971. They've usually gone, okay, it's an assistant head coach, we're gonna have or a coordinator, we're getting as head coach here. They did that with Deshaun Foster. Can they enable Bob Chesney though? Because again, if it's pure coaching, I would take Chesney over even Golish and Silverfield. Like he can
Mhm.
coach, he has won. It's now they're recruiting. So right now, if you're Jarman and you did a great job, you got Chesney. How do you help a guy who he's now playing in the big sandbox? Now you're no longer scrounging for 2-star, 3-star recruits. You got to go up to 4 and 5 stars. So how can they help Chesney, get a staff that's equipped to handle recruiting in the Big Ten California area?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just how much they're willing to invest. Are you willing to give him a big pool of money to go hire assistants who do know the area for recruiting? Because he doesn't, right? Like we just said. So, can he get these assistants who are from California, who have relationships with these high schools, with some of the bigger programs in that state, to have those pipelines to get California kids and the good ones at that to come to UCLA? And are they willing to invest enough in NIL to where they can match an offer that USC gives a kid, to where they can get close to, what an Oregon or a Washington gives to a California kid? So it's really just up to the administration of how much money are we willing to put into this football program under the assumption that it can be successful, but not because there's a proof of success. It's I mean, it was the same thing with Kiffin going to the other schools. Like, how much are they willing to put into the assistant pools and the NIL? It's a smaller scale with Chesney and UCLA, but that really is still going to be the deciding factor, I think, of how quickly can he get them to Big Ten relevance. Are they willing to invest in local recruiters to help bring in talent that maybe he doesn't would be out of touch with? And can they match the offers that mainly USC is going to be giving to these other California kids?
Finally, if there was a perfect hire in terms of everything that you could want, I'm guessing Kentucky got their guy. It's
Hmm.
not only is he a rising coaching star, not only is he young, he's a Kentucky native.
Hmm.
Kentucky. That's right. Will Stein, the new head coach for the Kentucky Wildcats. I could hear Clay Fink and everybody just like dancing on tables, maybe some nipple play. Like they're ecstatic. So tell me here for us who are just looking from outside, why is Will Stein for Kentucky fans like the dream hire?
I mean, he's an offensive guy for starters, right? Like you said. And in Kentucky under Stoops, they've been a good team, but they haven't been threatening you with 35 points a game. You haven't been scared of what Kentucky can do offensively to you. And Stein has shown that he can do that with offenses, with the right talent. And being a guy who grew up a Kentucky fan, he went to Louisville, but that's, his love for Kentucky does trump that Louisville stuff, I think. So having a guy who loves the program, understands what the program wants and needs, like that's huge. And under Stoops, they were just treading water. He had some good years, but there was never really a year where you looked at that Wildcats team and said, they might go to Atlanta this year. They could beat Georgia. You were never there. A guy like Stein, who brings in that sort of that juice, that fire, that spark, that fun, all of a sudden, if your offense is having a good day, you can beat anybody. You can. And at Kentucky, they're not competing with the top schools in the SEC for all that talent. They're still getting, some blue chip guys, especially on the lines of scrimmage. If you can maintain your recruitment in the trenches, Stein brings in the ability to now all of a sudden recruit guys at receiver, to recruit a good quarterback, to get another quick running back like Seth McGowan they have right there now. So he just sort of brings in what Kentucky's been lacking, which I do believe is why they're so excited about him.
Who does he keep? Who's the guy that, because as you said, he's a quarterback guru. So, he can, coach up, and we've seen his development of Dante Moore, and that's what I think sold Kentucky fans. On the Kentucky roster, who are some of the guys that he needs to keep that, could be a success for him now that he's the head coach and has more of an offensive philosophy?
I do think keeping Cutter Bowl is pretty important. He wasn't even the starter at the beginning of this year, but he's played really good. And he's also a Kentucky kid. He's a true freshman. I think keeping him to sort of be your quarterback of the future is a good place to start. Dante Dowdle at running back, he's a junior. I don't think he's not a guy who's going to come out to the draft this year, I don't think, because he was behind Seth McGowan. He can sort of be your workhorse in the backfield. And then at receiver, there's not a lot to love. I think that Willie Rodriguez at tight end, he was their third best receiver this year. He's just a sophomore. You can kind of incorporate him a good bit. So there's not a ton of guys on offense that you want to keep. The main one is Cutter Boley because he's from Kentucky is Stein, so is Boley. You can sort of start building up that, we are going to use our homegrown guys who are from Kentucky, who love Kentucky, start winning games. And then, like you said, with how much he's proven he can develop players offensively, then you can start plucking some of these guys who are either bench warmers at just say a Florida or an Ole Miss, or just some of these top guys from, non-power schools, and just sort of, mix and match your way to a good offensive unit. And will it happen this year? I don't know if he can turn around that fast, but I do think you'll see an improvement, at least offensively, next year for Kentucky. And all you have to do is show that proof of concept, show, this four-star receiver, like, look, this is where our offense was. If you're lined up outside, this is what we could have done differently. This is how we could have been better. So I think that you'll see that improvement offensively next season to set him up for 2027, where he can really start pitching, whether that be transfers or it be high school recruits. Like, I know that we're Kentucky, but this is a new age of Kentucky, and this is how we're going to do this, and we need you to be a part of it. That could be his good pitch.
Before we let you go, here's the one caveat, I guess, which everybody in Kentucky, I know, Kentucky, as I said, they're ecstatic. They're dancing on tables. They've thrown champagne parties. Will Stein's never been a head coach.
Uh-huh.
So should there be like for Kentucky fans, should there be like lowered expectations where unlike, Sumrall, Chesney, Golish, Silverfield, Morris, this guy's never run a program. He's never, been a head coach, never had to make the decisions. Should there be lowered expectations in Kentucky for like, okay, look, he might be the guy, we have faith in him, but there's going to be a lot of on-the-job training with him.
Definitely. And I mean, for Kentucky, I talked about with Arkansas too, with their program expectations. Like, if you're at Kentucky and you go 8-4 every year with a 9-3 mixed in for like a decade, they might name the field after you. So you don't even really need to be this playoff ready coach to come in there and really be seen as a success in Lexington. And in terms of being a coordinator with not a lot of head coaching experience, like Kirby Smart didn't have any experience before he went to Georgia. Ryan Day didn't have a whole lot before he went to Ohio State. So you've seen coordinators be able to make that jump, and maybe not immediately, but be able to develop into these great head coaches with time. And at Kentucky, I'd imagine they give Stein a good bit of time to get things going because of where the program's at, and because they're not a school that, like I said, expects to come out and win 9 or 10 games all of a sudden and be in the playoff talk. They just don't expect that right now. So Stein should have a few years of, just making bowls. Can you grab a win versus Louisville? Can you grab a win over a Missouri? Can you beat Tennessee one time? And just sort of show that growth, show that what you're doing is working and is different, most importantly, to buy yourself that time to keep developing not just your roster and your staff, but also yourself. To give Stein to keep learning from the mistakes that he will inevitably make is as his first year as a head coach, to learn from it, fix it, and become an even better version of Will Stein, the head coach, year over year.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We got to wrap this up, but we always love having him on the show. I give you from Tailgate Talk SEC and guest on SEC this morning. I give you College Football Journal's insider podcaster. I give you Will Thomas. So, Will, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is the podcast? Where is the Twitter, Instagram, or probably a TikTok or a Rumble channel? Where can fans catch out your work?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at W Thomas Sports, and then Tailgate Talk SEC on YouTube, podcast, and on TikTok, just everywhere else.
Will Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure having you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here. Only on, it's Last Call. Last Call with the alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.